Well, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you onto the Deliberate Orthodoxy podcast. The Deliberate Orthodoxy podcast exists to promote Christian maturity and foster conversations that are edifying to the local church and her witness in the world. And I'm excited today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I think this is the third time that I've had Michael Clary on. And I mean, we don't have many repeat offenders or repeat, visitors. And so I'm really excited about that. So at the end, I'm going to get your address from you and I'm going to send you something. So anyway, it's not a bag of money, or anything like that. And so you don't just be waiting with bated breath, but man, we really appreciate, always enjoy getting together with you. I appreciate reading behind you in your Substack and some of the articles and things that you put out. And man, I just appreciate someone that's in the Word and is trying to bring the Word to bear, on the culture around him. And so, man, I just thank you for coming on here with us today. Now, I don't want to tell too much about you. I want to let you introduce yourself. And so why don't you do that? Just tell us a little bit about your family, your journey in ministry, and where you presently serve.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. You've upgraded the background since I saw you last.
Well, a little bit. I'm telling you, we had to get out of I think probably last time you were looking at my nasty office or something behind me, or
there's no telling what it was. Recall.
Yeah, it probably was. And so I need to. Some of those titles back there may have been some of these guys that you're going to talk about today. So we want to be sure. I had to hide those before you came on today. So.
Oh yeah, I have a stamp on my shelf back here behind me, and it says "heretical garbage for research purposes only."
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
So Michael Clary is my name. I'm pastor and church planter. We started our church in 2010, right in the middle of the church planting boom of the 2010s. And, that, I don't know, it was like a 15-year stretch where it really was quite a bit of momentum. And so I was right in the middle of that. And Southern Baptist, we planted through North American Mission Board, and they had it was called the Nehemiah Project, which is a thing specifically through Southern Seminary that I did. So I preceded the Send North America strategy by a couple of years, but I was involved in that because we helped plant churches during that time too. But yeah, I've been in ministry now, or been as a pastor now since, if you count the core group phase before our church started, it's been 18 years.
Wow, man, that's awesome.
That's so good, flies, man.
Now y'all like moved across the river or something. Didn't y'all make some kind of move here a year or two ago?
Yeah, we did. It's about a year and a half ago. So we planted in the inner city of Cincinnati, and at the time we were in the city for the city, doing what they said to do. But as I got older, my kids got older, and so we live in a townhouse in inner city Cincinnati even now. A lot of stairs. And I was just like, urban lifestyle is, I don't know that suits us well as we get older.
Yeah.
And the demographics of our church have shifted away. We still have, a lot of young people, but as the people get older, we wanted our church to be located in a place to where it made sense for them to bring big families and 15 passenger vans too, and that kind of thing. So we were very fortunate. We found a building right across the river, about 10 minutes from our old place. We're in Kentucky, but still same area. And the whole congregation just moved with us, and it's been a great experience for us.
Man, that's great. That's great. Well, I just followed very loosely. I do follow you guys on the Current Reality podcast, which you guys put out. It seems like, maybe every month or two or something, y'all will have something come up, and so I've been kind of at least following in y'all's movement, from one place to another. And sounds like the Lord's really blessing your ministry, blessing the church there. And what a blessing, man. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
it is.
Yeah. And I mean, we certainly always want to celebrate what God's doing and what God has done. But today, of course, we're having you on here because I saw that you were about to release through Canon Press, about to release a new book. And this is a book that sort of, in some ways, I guess your ministry, your thoughts have been moving toward this over the past several years, because even in some articles and things that I'd read here a few years or a year or so ago, I think it was about a year ago, you were sort of foreshadowing this book that was coming out and this idea of loser theology. Now, that's certainly a provocative title, and I'll read all of it. It's Loser Theology, Why the Weak Will Not Inherit the Earth. And so, that's a really provocative title there, but can you explain a little bit? I mean, you're talking about the study of God there, theology. So what is loser theology?
Yeah, it is a provocative title, but I mean the concept is, it's harmful.
Yes.
The loser theology is harmful, and so it's an appropriate name. But strangely, Paul, it's not like many people who would ascribe to this. A lot of people, a lot of them will say it out loud. They're
Yeah.
like, we're called to lose.
Mhm.
Some people will, like there's a, famous, we lose down here is what,
Yes.
John MacArthur said that. And of course, the book is, I have the greatest respect for MacArthur, but that one line did, kind of capture a mood or a spirit. But there are others that say,
Yeah.
we're supposed to lose down here. We're supposed to be faithful losers, to demonstrate our commitment to Christ and how graciously we lose,
Yes.
and lay down our power, to not assert ourselves, in any sort of way that would be considered offensive by the culture, but be winsome to the culture. Let them win so that
Yes.
we can demonstrate a faithful posture. And so it really is a loser theology, a theology that encourages Christians to lose, to keep losing, feel good about it. And it teaches passivity, retreat, defeat. That is the way of Jesus. And so in these ways, it really has kind of discipled us to feel like, well, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And we should just, let it happen.
Yeah. Well, you and I are about the same age, I think, loosely. I'm not going to ask your age or anything like
I'm
that.
29 years old.
29. Well, you and I are the same age then. See there? I mean, man, I just knew it. Yeah. But
been 29 for the last 21 years.
There you go. Well, there you go. Well, I'm 49 for real. So yeah, we are. We're the same boat. We're the same boat. And so, but we came along, I think, through seminary. I went to New Orleans, of course, and so we didn't know one another or anything like that. But we came through about at the same time, in terms of just our ages and calling to ministries and those things, and kind of moving into that theological education and those things, and much of what and even just coming into the SBC, kind of at the same time. So many things about what you've written about cultural trends, and then the people who have aided in the development of this loser theology reality. It really resonated with me, as I look back over my time in the SBC. And so I would appreciate it. Certainly you've done the research and you've written the book, but could you kind of, and I know this isn't just for SBC folks, but I mean, I'm SBC, you are as well. And most of the people probably going to watch this will be, can you give us a brief sketch of how we how we've gotten here?
There was an article written a few years ago now by Aaron Wrenn, and he sketched out something. It's very, very, very simple, but I found it very helpful and illustrative to explain what the phenomena is that we're experiencing right now.
Yes.
And that article is three worlds. So there's positive world, neutral world, negative world. Yeah. Positive world is the culture is generally positive toward Christianity, and that was, previous generations up until more recent times. Then there was the neutral world where Christianity was not so positive; it was more neutral, and that's like a pluralistic public square. And you had a lot of ideas like, well, diversity. We want diverse opinions, diverse points of view, and may the best ideas win. And Christianity, you've got a seat at the table to present your ideas. And that was from about, maybe the late 90s to the mid 2010s. And that was right when my church was planted.
Yes.
That was when I went to seminary. Before I went to seminary, I was on staff with Crew. And so we were involved in ministry there. And the spirit, right during that 20-year period of time or so, this neutral world, the idea was we don't want to be hostile toward the culture. We don't want to be triumphalistic. We need to persuade them through a particular posture that would be winsome and friendly and humble, likable. Those things are fine. And there's nothing wrong with those things. But it became a dogma that prevented Christians from ever veering outside of those parameters.
Yes.
And so then what happened by Aaron Wrenn's accounting is that around 2014 or so, we shifted into what he would call negative world, which is where we are now. And in negative world, it's basically the culture has turned more hostile toward Christianity. Now, the people can quibble with the dates or the framework itself, but I think it does have some explanatory power that I think everybody feels it, regardless if you don't acknowledge the framework. Everybody feels, well, things are different than when I was younger. And that change does demand things of me, given our cultural moment. And so in negative world, there are it's like we need to have, we can't just assume that our ideas will get a fair hearing, because our ideas have been rejected before we've even been given a hearing. And then culture has begun to impose this new standard of morality that is foreign to the past and hostile towards the Christian faith. And we're told, like, well, this is the way it is now. Homosexual marriage, that's now the law of the land. Illegal immigration, unchecked, practically borderless, that's just the way things are now. And so with these changes, now we're Christians, like, well, the tools that, at least from my experience, the tools that I was trained on no longer are applicable. And in this current culture moment that we're in, it's like we need to be more clear and direct. I'm wearing my Speak Plainly shirt today.
There you go.
We need to just speak plainly. This is what the Bible says, and we're not ashamed of it, and we're not going to be embarrassed of it. So I think that where we are now is the tools that we were trained on for this moment in time, about 20 or 30 years or so. We're now seeing the consequences of that played out. And the consequences of that is we now have a generation of Christians and pastors and leaders that think, like, well, this is the way we're supposed to act. We're supposed to be nice no matter what, be a Ned Flanders kind of nice guy, Christians and pastors. And if you ever say anything that might offend a homosexual or somebody that's pro-abortion or, a Democrat, then you're now damaging your witness. You're not being like Christ. You're failing to be sufficiently humble, and you shouldn't do that. And so that became that's the dogma in some corners of the Christian world now, and that's what I've labeled loser theology. And now it's like we have a church that doesn't have a spine, largely. And I think it's why Charlie Kirk was so effective. People are like, hey, this guy isn't following the path of everyone else. And so his message resonated. But I think people also fear, if I speak like Charlie Kirk did, I might end up like Charlie Kirk did.
That's right.
I want to be quiet.
That's right. Well, and I remember, coming along, the late 90s. Well, this was early 2000s, when I started seminary. It was probably 2001, 2002. I surrendered to ministry after I'd been out of school for a couple of years, and those kind of things. And so, went to seminary, and I remember, and I was a youth minister, on staff at a church, like so many do, as they're going to seminary and those things. And I remember books like, during that time period, Blue Like Jazz, by Donald Miller, Velvet Elvis, by Rob Bell. This is taking me back, even just thinking about those. And of course, Rob Bell just went the way of the straight heretic. It didn't take long, for those things. But for a period of 4 or 5 years there, this sort of there began to be this sort of squishy, very critical of previous generations, hipster kind of thought process. It while those guys were not mainstream SBC, and those guys were just writers. Of course, Rob Bell, he had a church. He's a pastor, but they were writers, and they were sort of kind of that non-denominational, kind of out there, doing those things. But that was sort of, maybe that was the extreme. But how did this work its way into SBC life?
Well, so Rob Bell was a cool guy.
Yeah, super cool.
Do you remember the Numa videos?
Oh, yeah, I was going to beat you to it. Yeah. I won't. Actually, there were. I was not the pastor. All right, I was not the pastor. I wasn't the one playing those videos, but there were some of those played in the sanctuary. The church. Of course, this was prior to, was it Love Wins or God Wins, whatever. All that stuff where he just kind of went off the rails. But yeah, absolutely, those videos were really, they made you think.
I think that conservative Christians have a cool problem, and that we want to be cool. And
we're not,
Rob Bell was cool.
We're not.
Yeah, we're not cool. We're not cool. And But to be cool, we
Mhm.
have this idea. Well, what's cool? Cool means
Yes.
you're kind of edgy, you're kind of
Mhm.
progressive, you're kind of
Yeah.
cozy with the prevailing winds of the world, and that's what makes you cool because you're
Yeah.
kind of on their side. But you have some people that would espouse what purported to be conservative theology, but they did it with this cool veneer.
Mhm. Yes.
And Rob Bell was the quintessential cool Christian pastor guy. He made these cool videos back when, and they incredibly well produced.
Yes,
You
they
know,
were
like
that
back
time.
when you'd have a VHS tape and a camcorder that was hang on your shoulder, and that was your church's video ministry.
Yes. Yes.
But they had Rob Bell that did these very slick, well-produced videos that were effective. And so people saw those and they're like, I want to be like that guy.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then there was this idea that he's reaching the lost. He's reaching
Oh, yeah.
people that we won't reach. And if we want to
Mhm.
save the next generation, we've got to be cool. Because if we're not cool, then the kids will leave the church. And
Mm.
we got to be cool like the kids want. And so I think Southern Baptists in particular, we are the cousin Eddie of evangelicalism. If you know from the Christmas Vacation
Oh,
movie,
yeah. Yeah, that's
uh,
us. Yeah.
we're kind of the, where people think of us as like the Hicks and the hillbillies, and
Yeah.
we're not the refined erudite types. That's the more PCA people.
Mhm.
So the Southern Baptists, we're just kind of the backwoods fundies. And I grew up in West Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, like independent fundamentalist,
Mhm.
King James only. I mean, those are my roots.
Yes.
And there was a period of time when I was seduced by that. I
Absolutely.
wanted to be cool, like I was, like and reach people. And there was always the marketing behind it. It's like, this is how you'll be
Mhm.
evangelistic. And so I think it always gained a lot of traction in SBC life. And then you had a handful of voices that could really pick up that baton and
Oh,
run
yeah.
with it and be the champion for it. And so you had a few, and so with the cool, you have like celebrity culture. And
Yes.
so in the SBC world, we had our own celebrity culture.
We did.
Russell Moore was,
Mhm.
evangelical celebrity for a while. David Platt was a celebrity for a while. Donald Miller was not
No.
Southern Baptist, but
No.
I think that he kind of blazed a trail for
Mhm.
these guys. And so by the time Russell Moore came along, it's like, okay, here's a scholar. He's very well spoken. He's intelligent, and we're Southern Baptists. We're kind of tired of being treated like we're idiots. And so Russell Moore is like a very smart man, and the smart man, Russell Moore, is saying all these things that we need to do.
Yes.
Well, Russell Moore ended up being probably the premier champion of loser theology in
Mhm.
the Baptist side of the equation. And I think that he, and of course, now we've seen how the last 10 years or so have gone for
Yes.
him.
Yes.
So he published the book Onward, and the book
Mhm.
Onward, I go after that a good bit in my book.
Yeah, you
And
do.
the book
Yeah.
Onward, it was published 2015. So
Mhm.
right in the thick of all this.
Yes.
And in that book, he was like, the Bible Belt is teetering toward collapse, and I let it fall.
Mhm.
Um, you have Ray Ortland, who
Mhm. Yeah.
tweeted something similar to where he said the Bible Belt Christianity needs to die because it made people worse in the name of Jesus.
Yes. Yes.
And I, I get what they're criticizing. If they're
Mhm.
criticizing hypocrisy, well, then yes, we want to get rid of hypocrisy. But what
Yes.
they did is they lumped together under
Mhm.
what they presume to be hypocrisy this whole classification of Christian,
Mhm.
which is Bible Belt Christianity, which
Yeah.
to people like you or me, I'm like, Bible Belt Christianity is how I got saved. This
Exactly.
is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. And I'll have
Yeah.
this guy out there who's championing, let's
Mhm.
abandon it, let's let it teeter and collapse.
Yeah.
And then what's not addressed is, well, what will take its place?
Yes.
And what we've seen for the past 10 years is exactly what's taken its place. We've had Muslims and we've had
Mhm.
LGBTQ jihadists,
Yeah.
we've had
Yeah.
all kinds of just secularization and just cultural madness that happened, just like erupted overnight.
Yes.
And so I think that the celebrity culture, wanting to be cool, a handful of well-known names trumpeting this, and then you had a generation of pastors that are like, well, Russell Moore, he's our guy. We're gonna do what he says. He's a big name in SBC
Yeah.
life. And before you know it, we have a lot of people that have subscribed to this, and we need to. So the book is like, let's identify what the problem is so we
Yes.
can correct it.
Yeah, and we'll get to that correction that you propose here in just a few minutes. But when you spoke about the Bible Belt, it really resonated with me. I mean, I pastor in Ruston, Louisiana now, and I pastored in rural South Louisiana for a period of time before I came back here. But this is the area I'm from, and much like West Virginia, but in some other ways, I mean, Ruston, I mean, I feel like is like the buckle of the Bible Belt. And I mean, we actually have a secular, liberal arts university here. I mean, we have Louisiana Tech University, but here in this little town of, 25, 30,000 people, we've got the largest Baptist collegiate ministry in the state of Louisiana, bigger than LSU, but, and all those things. And it's I see the movement, especially guys that are sort of reform minded, I hear them beat the drum for, things like, you've got to homeschool your kids, you got to do these things. And I agree with most of the precepts that they're bringing forward, but I take for granted the fact that I live in a town where the school board is made up of Christians primarily, and I live in a parish like counties, other places, we have parishes, and in the city here, our mayor, the leadership is mostly Christian people. And man, it's not a bad place to live. You understand? Yes. You understand what I mean? And so I totally, I hear these things, and I hear what Russell Moore's saying, and these other guys in the ivory tower, far removed, from the churches that are supporting the Southern Baptist Convention by and large, which are, churches just like the one I serve in, and in places and areas just like the one I'm in. And so we've got our problems like everyone else. And to me, there's a whole lot to be learned, from looking into these areas where, Christ is still proclaimed, and there's still very strong churches, and it does still affect the culture, around us, in these towns. These are the things that people are, just like we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. Some of the solutions are still being seen in these areas that are far behind other places in cultural change, Yeah, and so I'm thankful for it, Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. We're here to talk about your book, but anyway, we'll move back into these things. But the events of 2019, up through really 2024, brought many of these undercurrents. They were there, but they were just brought out into the open. And you've been sort of a consistent voice, over this time, and certainly in your church, I'm sure, but then also, in your writing, and those kind of things. Can you share a little of the positive shift that we've seen since 2019, the positive shift that we've seen away from loser theology? How have you seen it, and where do you see it?
So I do think there's a positive shift, and it could be considered, some would call it a backlash.
Yeah.
And so maybe people that are afraid of it, that don't want it. So I'm certain that somebody like Russell Moore would see this shift away from loser theology. He would call it Christian nationalism,
yes,
or some other kind of boogeyman term.
Yes.
And there is the pendulum always swings from one extreme to the other. And so you could say, there are extremes that we'd want to avoid, excesses. But I think generally speaking, we have, when you have people that the pain and hardship that is caused by a loser theology, if it's in the abstract, then it's more of an academic exercise to think about it.
Yes.
But young people, I'm like young men and women, especially, young men and women, but especially young men, they are staring into an abyss whenever they consider what is the future like for me. They see their country, the culture slipping away. They can't buy a house. And I've got 4 children that are entering into adulthood now.
Yes.
And I'm worried about them. I'm like, I want my kids to be able to have, own a home, and to be able to live, to have a good life.
Yes.
And that's not indulgent material comforts, but just the normal kinds of things that are blessings we take for granted.
Yes.
And so people that are saying this, I'm like, that 10, 15 years ago, you were better able to buy a house, but now it's like, I think there's like 13%. I better not quote a statistic. There a very small percentage of America's population, a shrinking number, are actual homeowners. And so many other people are renters. And this generation, they're like, not only has this happened, but the things that accelerated this and made it worse are supported by the church.
Yes.
And the church is at least say, if they're not saying, if they're not supportive of it, they're at least telling me, well, you're not allowed to oppose it because that's not Christ-like.
Mhm.
And they're fed up. They don't want it. So what I want to do is I would like to give an alternative voice to some of the more harmful, damaging voices that are just filled with rage.
Yes.
That just says like, well, you got to go out there and get what's yours. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's more of a very bleak,
Yes.
self-centered focus. And I'm like, okay, what about a Christian? What are we called to do as Christians?
Mhm.
And I would say, to start with, we cannot continue just telling ourselves to roll over and let it happen.
Mhm.
It's time that we have to assert ourselves and push back.
Yeah.
Now, there's a number of ways that could go, but we have to push back. So to get to your specific question, the alternative, so the book is split into two halves. The
Yes.
first half is a diagnosis of loser theology. The second half is a
Mhm.
prescription of what I call it high agency Christianity.
Yes.
There's a number of labels you could give it, but I went with high agency because it begins with what can I change in my own life. I may not be able
Yes.
to change Washington, D.C., but what I can change in myself is the decisions that I make day to day. And that begins with not being a passive loser, so to speak, just kind of letting it happen.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, I have a responsibility and a duty to do my part to push back.
Mhm.
And so I want to assert agency, and that means I want to take risk. I have to be courageous. I have to have more boldness and trust and fear, fear of God and faith.
Yes.
And I have to have a doctrine of authority and power that doesn't just tell me to be afraid of it, run from it, and lay it down, but rather
Yeah.
to pick it up and wield it with righteous authority and power as Christ would have me do it. So that's the antidote. And
Mhm.
so I finish off the book with just 12 practical disciplines
Yeah.
of what a high agency Christian life would look like. And so that is um, that's the remedy for loser theology.
Yes. And not to give away, everything there, but I mean, certainly, I mean, you're encouraging Christian men and certainly women as well, but I mean, certainly encouraging Christian men to run for office and encouraging them to, take responsibility and become active in things in their communities and those kind of things. We're not talking about, we can't take back this or take back that, we're not talking about culture war things apart from, it's got to begin right where we live, in our homes. And then, and so I really appreciate that. I'd read, about a year ago, I think an article that you had written, where you actually talked about high agency Christianity. And I think you were even talking about writing the book at that time, and you were going through those things. It really resonated with me, but I want to kind of end our time we're getting close to the end of our time. I want you to kind of maybe speak to pastors. There'll be pastors who'll see this, and how would you encourage guys like me? Somebody that's laboring in a Southern Baptist church, a good, gospel centered, Christ centered church. We preach God's word each week. You preach expository sermons. We're trying to keep the main thing. How active should we be in addressing these sort of phenomenons, or how active should we be in addressing loser theology or the cultural issues of our day? I really struggle with that.
That's a good question. So as a pastor at my church, loser theology, I might have mentioned it a couple times from the pulpit
Yeah.
here.
You're
So
not
it's
up there preaching your book or anything,
no.
No.
But I think when people in my church read the book, they'll be, okay, I recognize this.
Mhm.
So it'll be something that's familiar to them. But so I think let's say bronze, silver, gold,
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah.
let's say, what's a bronze medal? What's the
Mhm.
least you could do? And I would say, pastors, just like, encourage the men and women of your church to be bold and courageous, and
Mhm.
don't tell them to bury their uh, bury their light under a bushel.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you've got some zealous young guy who's out there, just overly zealous and eager, and I'm like be patient with that young man because he's working out his courage.
Mhm.
What a lot of pastors do is they're afraid of looking bad. They're afraid of somebody stepping out
Yeah.
of line, and they're afraid somebody might make a mistake. And so
Mhm.
they squash that
Yes.
zeal.
Yeah.
He had one of the 12 is called Simon the Zealot. and Jesus did not squash his zeal. Peter was, he was a mess to deal with half the time, but Jesus saw the potential in him. And so just don't squash their zeal. Give them permission to be bold and daring, and they'll respect you for it. I would say if you want to get into it, you might start to identify what are some of the patterns in the Christian world that are causing harm. And so there's usually little slogans and catchphrases like Jesus calls you, the gospel is all, let's see, the gospel is all about the cross, and the cross calls us to lay down power. I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but these little pithy slogans, like, start to dismantle those for people and help them to discern. These sound good, but they smuggle in assumptions that are ungodly and unbiblical. So help people to discern
that. He gets you, right? Yeah, that's one too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he gets us.
That was a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there are, I mean, people complain about social media, but I'm like, if you're following the right accounts on Twitter, you can be very edified and get great insight into the culture by certain voices that are helpful. I try to be one of those voices. And there are others that can be helpful. So, like, pay attention to cultural trends and help your people to discern. And I would say a gold medal is to actively champion people being bold and courageous, and you have to model that for them. But my calling is a pastor, so I'm not a political guy. I'm not a political activist. I'm a shepherd, and I write. And so pastors don't have to be involved in. If you've got a skill there, by all means, get involved in politics. But that's not something that every pastor has to do. I think at the very least, just don't prevent other people from going into it. So if you got a young guy that wants to start a business or run for office, don't discourage him, rather encourage him. And I think you'll earn their trust, and it'll be helpful.
Absolutely. Well, I think oftentimes for many of us, I know for myself, that when you lean so hard into shepherding, protecting, those kind of things, you can maybe be overzealous in trying to insulate your people from things that they're not going to be insulated from anyway. They need to be prepared to see those things and discern, in society. And God bless, young men that do have a desire to change the world around them. And from a Christian, godly perspective, thank God for that when God begins to raise those up. And I think he is raising up. We've seen, I think in most areas, we're seeing a trend, especially among young men, where they're wanting to engage once again. And like you said, probably as it may be, some may see it as a backlash, but certainly we see it as hope. It's encouraging. It really is.
Amen.
And so how can we, let's we can talk maybe a little more broadly, but certainly even within our churches, our communities, you're in a very different context there in Cincinnati. Our urban centers, look much different than our rural areas, and while we're not rural, it feels that way, comparatively speaking, we are. How do we begin to cast a vision, for influencing culture toward, and not just toward, we're not trying to take over. All right. I mean, praise God, if godly people were in every office, and writing, legislation and doing that with courageously and boldly instead of what we're seeing today in so many circles. But how can we cast a vision to influence our culture towards something, a word that we don't hear at all anymore, which is virtue? There was a time when we wanted statesmen and we were looking for men of virtue, and it seems that those are few and far between.
Yeah. Virtue has, by modern definition, virtue has been shrunk down to just your character. And your character means, like, what do you feel? What do you think? What kind of happens between the ears and in the heart and the soul? Whereas historically speaking, virtue was, a virtuous man was a statesman. He was a patriot. He was somebody who took responsibility. And so I think there has to be, there is very little that I'm hearing in the broader Christian world as a vision for Christian statesmanship and virtue, as in public. And so So I think there is a significant role of the pulpit of just teaching virtue, and the scriptures use the word virtue, and it
Yes.
teaches what some of these virtues are, many
Mhm.
of which are inward oriented and many of which are
Yes.
outward oriented,
Yes.
and calling people to, and I think painting a picture, because the thing is, Paul, we can easily, guys that are, in our kind of in the middle of our journey here, we remember a different time. We remember, so my mother is in her 70s,
Mhm.
and there are times when she just gets this look in her eye whenever we talk about her childhood,
Yes.
and she has a bittersweet, there's like something um something sweet in the sense of there's a nostalgia there, but
Yes.
there's also a grief, because
Mhm.
she's like, I don't understand the world I live in anymore.
Yes.
And I think if we can look to the past, tell stories of, people that were virtuous, tell stories of what life has been like, and
Yes.
how we can pull some of those things into the future and apply them in our modern context. I think there's a need to inspire people. And
Yes.
so like the just the state of the world can be bleak.
Mhm.
And I think bleak is the mood right now. And I think it's
Yes.
some of the maybe by design, because people that are hopeless are easier to manipulate. And so it's like the Shawshank Redemption. He's like, hope is a dangerous thing. Morgan Freeman, that voice, hope is a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
But I think if people have hope that things can get better, if they can have an
Yes.
optimistic, joyful
Mhm.
disposition, then that can inspire them to summon from within, by the
Mhm.
power of the Spirit, the
Yes.
virtues needed to live with hope and optimism in the
Yes.
world. I think there's such a need for young people to hear that, and
Mhm.
pastors who give that message that will resonate, especially with young people who are desperately in need of hope.
Absolutely. Well, and I think for us, we have to. Um, I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that we've got to do is remember that we can grieve over our culture, and we can grieve over the lack of virtue that we see and all those things. But we are to grieve as those who do have hope. Our hope is in Jesus
Yes.
Christ,
Amen.
and I don't think we ought to. Uh, we lose down here. I don't think that ought to be our mindset. Even though I love John MacArthur, we always have to, be sure and say that after we quote him in that way, But, I do love him, but I think that certainly we know that Christ is on the throne, and we have seen this. We have to remind one another. We've seen this in the past. There have been, I mean, dark times in the history of the church, not just in the culture, but in the church itself, when God brought reformation, and it was through great trials and tribulations and those things, but God moved, and we see revivals, things like that in the past. So we know that God moves in his church, and his church is going to continue to persevere. And so we praise God for that, man. And
Amen.
I gotta watch you though. I mean, you're publishing with these guys at Canon, and all this positivity. You may be going post millennial. You never know. I'm going to be watching, listening, on that. So
Oh man, I love the post mill guys. Yeah, I
I
get
do
along great
too.
with them.
I love their optimism, man. I'm all about that.
Well, I personally am a millennial,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but I have two of my elders at least that are post mill,
yeah.
and but I the argument that I make is not an eschatological argument
No, it's
primarily.
not. It's not.
It's more of a Christian discipleship argument.
Absolutely. Well, I just have to give you a hard time, and love that you kind of poke the bear a little bit there, but no, I appreciate so much you coming on here today, and I know folks enjoy those that watch it, whether it be in our congregation or folks in this area. How can they find you? How can they find your writing? How can they find your work?
The book is available at losertheology.com,
Okay.
and that takes you to the Canon Press, their page for the book.
Yes.
My writing, so it's D Michael Clary. D is my first
Mhm.
initial, and then Michael Clary, CLARY.com. That's my website, and so it's like a Substack.
Yes.
So it's basically articles, and you could subscribe there if you'd like to read
Mhm.
those articles. And on Twitter is also at D Michael Clary, and I'm fairly active there, depending on how busy I am.
Absolutely. Well, I know folks will want to find you there, and also I'm going to mention again the Current Reality podcast. That's been a blessing for me. That's where primarily I've kept up with you, and then that pointed me toward some other places like these, and things that I could read. So I appreciate you so much for coming on today. And certainly I look forward to hearing how your book does. It comes out when now? In August
4th is when it ships.
All right, August 4th. So they can pre-buy these books. They can have one shipped to them. It'll head out on August the 4th, hopefully. So that sounds great. Well, I appreciate you being on here today. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Paul.